All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the Quackit Bootstrap 4 tutorial. And there are 32 lessons, and in the last section, or first video on this, I went over what is Bootstrap, getting started, Bootstrap containers, and the Bootstrap grid system. In this particular this particular video, I plan on going over typography, tables, forms, and custom forms. So, this page, as it says, shows how certain text elements are rendered when using Bootstrap without using any classes. Generally, any page that links to Bootstrap 4 style sheet will render these elements in the same way. Alright, so it says their body text. Bootstrap 4's global default font size is 16 pixels. And it also has a font size of 1 rem applied. It says there it uses a native font stack. So in other words, I believe that if you don't specify a font, it will use the default font for that particular browser, whatever the system font is. And it says there's a fallback to Helvetica Neue, Arial, and Sans Serif. Well, bottom line is this: if you want control over how the site looks font-wise, then you pick the font. Put that in your CSS. All headings and paragraph elements have their top margin removed. Headings have a bottom margin of 0.5 rem, and paragraphs have a bottom margin of 1 rem. But again, as mentioned, you can change those. So they have examples here. Here is an example of heading elements as they appear in Bootstrap 4. That's with nothing. But you'll notice, look at the difference between these, and it may not look like much, but it says Bootstrap includes heading classes from H1 through H6 in case you need to render some inline text. So, in this first example, there was nothing extra in there. But in the second example, we're actually using the built-in classes. Subheadings, as it says, you can create a subheading or secondary text by placing a small element within a heading. Okay, so notice the difference in size in all of these, how you lose the boldness and it gets smaller. Display headings are designed to stand out more than normal headings. There are 4 types of display headings: display 1, display 2, display 3, and display 4. So you can take any one of the H1 through H6 and display them in any of these. You'll notice that the font looks a little different. It's thinner. You could look at it and say that maybe it's a little bit more newer looking. All right, I don't know. This is called lead text. And if you make, for example, if you give something a class of lead, and typically you use a paragraph for this, but notice the difference between these two paragraphs on the screen. In the first one, we said class equal lead. You can see the font size is a lot bigger, and it ends up standing out a lot more. Typically, the first paragraph that you have in a Jumbotron, you'll have a class of lead in it. All right. You can use a marked element, and it doesn't really show very well on here, but it's kind of like this. This basically has, for lack of better words, let's see if I shrink it down, if it shows a little better. Not really. But what it does more than anything else is it draws a cream-colored box around the text. All right, that represents the text as marked or highlighted. Abbreviations, as it says, the ABBR tag represents an abbreviation or an acronym. Okay. In Bootstrap, abbreviations with a title attribute are rendered with a light dotted line in order for help. Okay, I'm not sure what they're really getting into here, but to show what that is. See that? So they've got an abbreviation where they're saying if the title is professor, but we show it as prof. When you mouse over it, show the full title. Initialism, as it says, you can use that to render the abbreviation in a smaller font size. Again, doesn't really show very well. But if you look on here, and you look on here, it really doesn't look very different. Block quotes are kind of neat. And typically when you use a block quote, if you really want it to stand out, you'll have a citing in it. In other words, if you're going to quote somebody, you'll put who it is you're quoting. All right, so this doesn't show much. But if you look at it with a source, you can see then it does. Okay, and you can use the reverse with it, and I think actually maybe that might look a little bit better. That looks more kind of like the way you'd see a quote in a book or whatever. Lists, if you do an unstyled list, it looks like this. Okay, so you can use the Bootstrap list unstyled class to render a list without their default list style, and I think it automatically is putting in a left margin. You can do inline lists. Why would you want to do that? Well, you use those a lot for nav bars. So you're putting the stuff on a single line. As it says, it displays the list then as like a display inline block. Okay. Description lists, I don't use these often. Some people, it's the old joke, people either swear by them or swear at them. But some people like those. Typically they're a DL, which is a definition list, and a definition list contains DTs, which are definition terms, and DDs, which I think is the definition. Says you can make terms and descriptions line up horizontally by adding the row class to the DL tag. So what are they doing here? Well, you may or may not be able to tell. All right, not really very much. It says this only works when the viewport is wider. If you don't see any difference between how the paragraph is displayed, you can open the preview in a new window. It still doesn't appear any different. You may need a larger device to view the example. Code, kind of like what we looked at before with the mark, but the box around it is sort of a light blue. Okay. Keyboard input, notice the difference in color. Pre-formatted text is designed to do just that. It's designed to take your text and basically display it the same way that you typed it, which is exactly what they're showing here. All right, based on exactly what they put in here. Sample text, as it says, the samp element is rendered like this. Okay, it says not enough memory. Does that really look any different? Not really on here. Okay. Variables for that, if you want to actually put in the value of variables. All right, let's jump into tables. And as mentioned here, Bootstrap 4 added some new table classes. One of the, two big things with tables. All right, in Bootstrap 4. First, they're meant to be even more responsive than they have been in the past. And second, they're meant to really, really act and react well with devices that people use where the person might have some kind of an impairment, physical impairment or whatever. So here's a basic table. And when you look at it, let me move this up. All that's different from this in a regular CSS or HTML table is you're saying here class equal table. But what do you get for that? Well, it's got some pre-formatting already. It looks pretty nice. Now, if you say, well, that's fine, Jeff, but I really don't understand what you're getting in a table. Remember, you can always go in and you can come in here and you can open up the Bootstrap min CSS file. I can come in here and I can search for table. All right. And that says display table, so I'm not sure if that's the only one or not. There's another display table, another one. Somewhere in there is just something just for tables. All right, we may have to really go and look for it. But you can do this, or Instead of using the bootstrap.min.css, you can bring in bootstrap.css and look at the non-minified version to see what this is exactly going to hold. Inverse table is just that. Notice here we've got a white background and black text. Inverse, the only thing that's different, the same table as before, but we said class equal table. Then we added to that table dash inverse. And you see how it changes. Okay? Instead of white background and black text, black background and white text. Striping is kind of nice. All you have to put again in there, this will bring back our original table, so class equal table, then table striped. And it says, it gives you alternating colors. All right? And again, I don't know how well that really shows on here for you, but these are lighter gray. For borders all around the table, you can use the table dash bordered. All right, and what does that give you? Well, it looks more again like a grid or like a spreadsheet. Hover rows. So when you want to take your mouse, again, notice all we're doing is saying table, the main class, and then here table hover. And now watch what happens when I hover over it. See that? When I move on to a certain row. All right. You can add a background color if you want, for example, to a T head. So we've got their T head class equal T head default. Okay, and you may or may not be able again to notice that pretty well, but that's got a light blue color. You can use the T head inverse for the heading. So the heading is the opposite. So just the heading has got a black background and white text. All of this stuff again is used for different kinds of effects. Smaller condensed table says if you find your table has too much padding, you can kind of try to squish it in a little bit. Okay. Contextual classes says you can apply color to individual rows or cells. Remember, a row is what we looked at before where the whole row lit up, and a cell is just one element that's in a row. There's 5 contextual classes: table-active, table-success, table-info, table-warning, and table-danger. And they're again going to apply to those colors that we looked at before. Now what you'll see when you look in here is a lot of times they'll have Bootstrap 4 versus Bootstrap 3. And I mean, do you have to care about that? Well, just remember that if you're doing new development, you're probably going to do it in 4. If you are going to maintain somebody's site, they may still have it in 3. If you want tables to automatically be responsive, all right, in fact, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this entire table, and I'm going to put it in here, and I want you to see all of it. So let me grab it, copy it, and first let me put it in here into my index file right here, and I'm going to change this back. It doesn't matter if it's fluid or not, but I'll just make it container. Okay? Now I'm going to put that table in. Now, I'm not going to worry about formatting it or anything else, but I'm not going to say table responsive. I'm just going to say class equal table. That's all I'm saying here. I've saved it, and I'm going to run it. There's my table, and notice that when I cut it down, it is not responsive. I think everybody would agree with that. It's not responsive. But by just coming in and adding table-responsive, let's see how it changes. Let's refresh to make sure that it picks up the change. See that? It's doing everything it can. When it gets to a certain point, it comes in and it adds a scroll bar. It didn't do that before, but it's trying the best it can to be responsive. If you've got a really humongous table, you try putting it on a phone, of course it's going to look a little bit funky. All right? Okay, let's jump into forms. What I like about forms is, again, you can create a form, But you can just drag the code in and then start making changes. So it says you use Bootstrap's form control class when you're working with input elements, text area elements, and select elements. It applies a width of 100% by default. Okay, so let's just grab everything that's here before we even look at it. Let's grab it from here, copy it to the clipboard, come to our example here. I'm going to remove the table. And I'm going to paste in the form. All right, we'll save and we'll run this. There you go. Is it responsive? It sure looks like it to me. Why do I keep losing that? I don't know. All right. I know I had to go bring this up an edge or something the other day, and I didn't like doing that, but I will. All right. So you can see that it is responsive, even down to something that'd be smaller than the width of a mobile phone. All right. So that stuff again was put in here without me doing much of anything. Okay, except saying that the class was form group. So again, that's what we made. An inline form, as it says, allows you to make form elements that render as inline block and are left aligned. What does that mean? Well, if we put in this and we run it, let's keep doing this. So we'll put in this form right here, copy it, we'll get rid of the form that we have in here. We'll put in our new form. We'll run the program again. All right, I guess I'll have to bring it back up an edge again. All right, so there it is, but what happens when we get to a certain width? See what it's doing? When it reaches a certain width, it looks like the other one did. All right, and that looks a little funky right there, but again, you can fix that with your own CSS. This is stuff that we're getting, for lack of better words, right out of the box, without us having to do much of any work with it. Hidden labels. Labels should always be provided, but if for some reason you don't want them, you can do this. But they even mention in there, that's considered bad practice. Labels are one of those things that are used, again, by a lot of screen readers and things like that. All right, so they are helpful. Horizontal form. There you go. So again, let's grab that one. To me, and I've said this to you before, this is the best way to learn this stuff, is to just grab a bunch of examples, put it in, and start playing with it. So there's the horizontal form. And again, you notice that it keeps even down to something small. When it jumps to a certain point, and it gets that small, then it does basically the block style as opposed to an inline style. Okay. There are minor differences between Bootstrap 4 and Bootstrap 3. If you're interested, I'll let you read that yourselves. When using legends, you have the option of adding Bootstrap's col-form legend. It styles the legend so that it looks more like a label. All right, let's do this. Again, how do you learn this stuff? You learn by doing. What do we have here? There's the form. So let's copy it. We'll again come out here. We'll grab the form that we have and we'll highlight it all and remove it. We'll add that form. Again, this is right from what we just saw. So there's the form. You notice it's got a few different things on it. And again, if I come back here, there it is. You can again see that it's responsive. without me having to add any code. It's already responsive. Now, that said, where's our legend here? Field set legend class equal call form legend. What if we remove the class equal, well, I want to see, make sure I'm grabbing the right one. Call form legend. What if we remove that class? Is that in there? Call form legend. What if I remove this? All right, so you see what it looks like. There it is. I'm going to refresh. Okay. What happened? Well, it's still responsive, still doing everything we wanted it to do. All right, but notice up here where it says fruit. All right, let's put this back. All right, notice where it says fruit. Let me refresh. Okay, you can see that it changed the size. All right. So what they're saying is it displayed or it looked more like a label doing that. All right. Form control size. Notice that you can take your stuff and make it small, a default size, or make it large. Column size, you can do the same thing. You can use the grid system to constrain columns so that they're a certain width. Help text. It says Bootstrap 4 provides the .form-text class that can be used to indicate help text. You can combine this with utility classes. This is a big one here. The ARIA is again part of the, it's kind of related to like the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, but it's for browsers for people who have any kind of an impairment. So if you're going to be doing something where some of your customers may have some kind of a physical liability, you might want to look at the .aria classes. And again, if I offend anybody by saying disability, I shouldn't. I should say impairment, whatever you'd want to call that. All right. Bootstrap includes validation styles for form controls, success, warning, and danger. You'll notice success comes in green, warning comes in kind of a tan or a brown, and danger comes in kind of a red. We have talked about some of these before when we looked at colors for other things. You can use Bootstrap's form control static to present plain text next to a label. That'd be this. Checkboxes and radio buttons. As it says, Bootstrap 4 provides .form-check, .form-label, .form-check-input, .form-check-inline classes. All right. So it says if you want to display radio buttons or checkboxes stacked, all right, you can nest them, nest each one inside of its own div. You can use disabled with this. Watch what happens when I go by the disabled button. Watch how my mouse changes. See that? Showing that it's disabled. You can create inline forms. So as it says, with Bootstrap 4, checkboxes and radio buttons are stacked by default. In other words, they appear above one another. You can display them inline by removing the surrounding div and adding the form check inline. Okay, there you go. So this is one of the reasons that I chose. There's actually two reasons why I chose this particular tutorial. One of them is quite often when they go over a topic that's fairly important, like forms, they put a reference on the bottom. The other is that really this stuff is so new, there aren't a plethora or a lot of tutorials on Bootstrap 4 out there. All right. Okay, so that is it for here. So let's jump on to the next one, which is custom forms. Okay. And it says here, increase browser consistency and customization options with Bootstrap's custom forms. These are completely custom form elements that replace the browser defaults. The idea behind custom forms is that they allow more customization and cross-browser consistency. Bootstrap 4 uses CSS to hide the original form element using opacity. So you get a little more color. All right, you can customize radio buttons, same kind of way. Okay. Custom checkboxes and radio buttons are displayed inline by default. If you want to stack them, you add a parent class of custom controls stacked right there inside of a div. Okay, and now they're stacked. To make a custom select control, as it says, you use the custom select class. So you notice the coloring on here. Same kind of thing with file upload. Okay. Now that's pretty much it for here. So we've gone through the first 8 of these, and hopefully you're getting something out of this. I really and truly hope that you are. But so far, again, we've gone over what is Bootstrap, getting started, Bootstrap 4 containers, Bootstrap 4 grid system. That was part 1. In part 2, which I just finished, we went over topography, tables, forms, and custom forms. In the next 4 lectures, we'll go over buttons, images, drop-downs, and button groups. And I'll be back with that shortly.